Hello and welcome to Five Questions with Dr. Fein. I am Mark Fein and work with a company called United Testing Service. Dr. Lou Fein, who is usually my cohort on this, is the founder of United Testing Service. But Dr. Fein isn't doing well. He's got a bit of a cold. We all know it's been going around, the cold and flu stuff. So I had to go to the bullpen and man, it's good when you got a deep bench, and boy, do I ever. I want to welcome in Eugene Williams. He was a classmate of mine, a teammate of mine at Ransom Everglades School in South Florida, then went to Emory University, undergraduate, also has a graduate degree, a teacher, an administrator, and now I would say influencer. He's
Okay.
got his own podcast called Talk to Me with Eugene Williams, and also look for him on Instagram. Why don't you plug it right here, Gene? Tell me what's your Instagram handle
Yeah,
there?
eWill JR. eWill
Okay.
JR. So EWILL JR.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. First of all, it's an honor to sit in Coach Lou's seat because that's my guy from way back.
Well, Gene and I go way back, and I'm going to tell you right now, first of all, his podcast is great. Again, it's called Talk to Me. You should check it out. And I was very honored that he asked me to be on it. We could go on and on about our history together, but we've done that already on
Right.
your
Yeah,
podcast. So
right,
we
right.
don't need, if people want to see it, if they want to hear about the great Ransom Everglades football team, they can go to your podcast and hear about
Correct.
that.
Correct.
I
Correct.
want to pick your brain about education. I've always admired you. And by the way, I just got to throw this out there too. I left one thing out in your introduction. Actor, singer, and most recently I saw, and I got to know, was it AI or wasn't it, dancer on your
That
Instagram account?
that was AI. My knees won't allow me to do that anymore. You know how it goes.
Okay. Well,
Once
that
you're
was
a matter
great.
of
But
certain age, your knees will say, no, don't do that anymore, sir.
well, I've always been, look, we're friends, we're good friends, we go way back, but I've also always been really a fan because you are such a talented guy and such a smart guy, and you're one of the people that were really blessed, decided to dedicate himself to education because there are too few talented people getting into the field because of the fact that, we always say nobody gets into education for money. You
No,
know,
sir.
Met a lot of people who maybe I was one of them. Look, I thought about it and I wound up worrying about can I support a family on this? And so but you're obviously super smart guy and tons of experience. First of all, tell people tell us about your path in education. And I know you're retired now from it, but because you were a teacher, administrator, talk about that.
Yes, so, I'm the son of educators. My late father, Dr. Eugene Williams Sr., was a professor of education at Howard University. So I grew up with a man who taught teachers how to be teachers. My late mother, Helen Williams, you knew her.
Mm-hmm.
Before she passed away, she was the regional language arts coordinator for Dade County Public Schools. One of the many jobs she's had when she worked at Dade County Public Schools. And so I came from educators, and so I kind of stumbled into it. I really didn't have a choice. It was just born into me. And so as a young person, I started out working with a company called Sylvan Learning Systems as
Yeah,
a
I
senior
know all
director,
about it. Sure.
and then left from there to go into public education, was a teacher in DC, in suburban Maryland, in Virginia, taught at a charter school called the Tech World Public Charter School in Washington, DC, taught at Orange County High School in Virginia, taught at Crossland High School in Maryland and several other places. And so by the time I was about 10 years into the classroom, I said, I want to make a bigger impact. I want to, I have solid classroom management. An assistant football coach at the time, so I could relate to all different types of kids. So I want to just kind of branch out and be bigger and be broader in terms of my impact. And so I went ahead and got the master's degree in education from University of Mary Washington, and became an assistant principal at places like Massaponax High School in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Orange County High School, again in Orange, Virginia. My last principalship was principal of Cumberland County High School in Cumberland, Virginia. And so I spent about 27 years, I'm just giving you the broad strokes, about 27 years in public education. And at that point, that was in 2023, I realized a few things. Number one, the kids were staying the same age, but only I was getting older. And so when you get to that point, you begin to realize the relationships you can form with young people as a 25 and 30-year-old man are much harder to form, at least they were for me, as a 50 and 55-year-old man. And so I said, you know what? It's time to, as you say, reach into the bullpen, let one of the young arms come up and get a chance to, throw some balls to the plate for a while. And now it's time for me to kind of mentor others and share my experiences with others. And I was also blessed to be married to an educator. My wife, Jewel, she's in the medical field now, but for many, many years, she was a school administrator and one of the best ones I've ever come across. So that's my story in a nutshell when it comes to education in terms of my background.
All right. Well, we've established your bona fides there, so we know you're qualified. Right, I've got just look. It's 5 questions with Dr. Fine. You're playing the part of Dr. Fine today, so I've got 5 for you. I've actually got 4, and I'm going to give you some word association. Just have you spit
Okay.
some things out. I want to start with look. We've got so many issues in education right now in this country. If there was one thing you could change, one thing you could do, if you could keep it to that. uh,
Mhm.
and there's no rules here, so however you want to answer, but if you could think of something you would change in the way we're educating our children today, what would it be?
I would say more opportunities for honest and early conversations with parents. By that I mean, sometimes as an administrator, and that's the beauty of now not being one anymore and being able to say what's on my mind.
Right.
It's way more effective. But in the while you're in the throes of working in a school, you're so worried about people's feelings and people's ideas and how much they love their kids and what they'll take to heart and what they won't. That it stifles real, genuine, honest conversation that will allow all parties to benefit and get better. So that's what I would really do. I would recommend to all administrators, all school systems, make sure you have a robust parent orientation program at the beginning of the school year, in the middle of the school year, and even at the end of the school year. Monthly or quarterly meetings so parents can know what's expected of them as parents, of the students, of our teachers, of our administrators, because we all have to work in this thing together. It's not going to be something where one particular subgroup is going to be able to affect change for all the kids. It's never been that way. I know as teachers, we like to believe that we're just so magical that just our mere presence can change a kid's life for good forever. And in some cases, it has. But overall, it really does take a village, to coin the phrase.
Yeah, and, you mentioned the things you have to worry about. One of the things you left out, and I'm sure you know about it, is lawsuits. My
Yes.
wife you mentioned your wife is a teacher. My wife also a 6th grade E-Law teacher, and it's interesting to see how administrations now handle situations with parents, and a lot of times they don't say it, but it's right there in front of your face. You're like, "They're worried about getting sued."
Every conversation you have in the back of your mind as an administrator, if you want to be a successful one, if you want to be one for more than a minute, is, how does this affect the school system legally? How does this affect me legally? What am I saying? Who am I saying it to? And what could it mean for my career or for my building?
And again, it's unfortunate sometimes that you have to do that because it prevents you from having those conversations, like you said, that you
Yes.
really want to have. All right. Question number 2. Guessing you had a number of these, but one of the hardest situation you ever had to deal with, either as an administrator or a teacher.
Every day was a different challenge in a different way for me personally. The toughest things I had to deal with were the deaths of students, because sometimes it might be because of a suicide situation, or it might be because of a fatal car accident, or whatever it is. Whenever you see a young life, snuffed out for whatever reason at such a, young and developmental point of a person's, career or life as a
Right.
student, you just feel like, even though you had nothing to do with it, you ask yourself, did I do enough? Was I enough of an influence? Were my teachers enough of an influence to maybe have stopped this? And so you have to be very, very careful not to, take too much of that on, when you're an administrator, because you really, a lot of times you watch social media and you see what, the teachers bashing the administrators and the administrators venting about what's going on in their schools, and you might think because of that algorithm that kids and teachers and administrators don't really coalesce and don't really, feel each other's pain. But if you've ever actually been in a school building, you do know that those relationships are formed and they are for years and sometimes forever. And so when a young person is, no longer on the scene because of something that he did to him or herself or something that somebody did to them, it hurts. It hurts a great
Well,
deal.
it's interesting because when I wrote down that question, that never entered my mind, and it makes me curious. In your education, is that something they ever talked to you about? Were you ever taught, or is that something you had to learn when you had to deal with it for the first time?
I'm trying to go back to my master's in education classes back at University of Mary Washington. No, we didn't really spend a lot of time on.
I was guessing that that's not
No,
something you're taught. Nobody can teach you how to deal with something like that.
there are so many things that you cannot prepare for as an administrator and as a teacher. You can't prepare for the deaths of your students. You can't, you can't prepare for that situation where maybe a young lady has sent an inappropriate picture on the internet to somebody, and then you got to explain to her, the all the many reasons why it's something that she should not be doing,
Yeah,
or he should not be doing. And then you got to explain to the parents, who then have a sense of guilt and shame because of that, and they wonder, well, what did I do to make this happen? And you have to explain to them, at some point, our young people have minds of their own and they do what they want to do. All you can do is be a role model for them and hope they follow your modeling as best they can. So I think about those things. No one prepares you for the idea of the things that you will find. If I told you in my years as a teacher and administrator, I have taken tasers off of kids, bullets,
it's
large amounts of drugs
yeah,
off of kids. No one prepares you for that. There's an element of, especially administration, that is nurturing, that is mentoring, that is caring, and there's another element that is totally law and order CSI.
right, right.
When you when something happens in your school and you have to do the investigation and the due process and looking at the cameras and making sure that this was not passed off to somebody, or some person didn't say this, or a teacher wasn't inappropriately hit or whatever. uh, these are real things that happen in school systems, and I want to tell the current school teachers out there, that are especially the ones that are on social media nowadays, talking about how rough things are. These things are not new.
Right.
Okay, I know it feels new because of COVID. We make these big pronouncements about COVID, and
And also
now it's going to change.
because
We
of
had these
these
discussions.
things
Yeah,
everybody sees it more, right? We're in a
yeah.
24-hour news cycle, so you hear about it more. It doesn't mean it didn't exist before.
Right, we had these discussions and incidents in the '90s. In some cases, I remember having conversations in the teacher's lounge, the teacher in the '80s and '90s, and they would make your toes curl compared to some things we talk about even nowadays. So it's new to it's new to these teachers. It's not new to education.
All right, let's go to the other end of the spectrum and be a little more positive here.
Sure,
I guess I'm gonna be, bending over backwards or stretching real hard to pat myself on the back here, but I'm an adjunct professor at the University of North Texas. I teach 2
sure.
classes over there, and I got a text message from a former student who just got a job, and he was very excited, and he sent me a very nice note saying how much he appreciated me and that it wouldn't have been possible without taking my class. And those moments are so great. Do you have real quick, I'll share one with my wife too. She had a student in 6th grade, and when the student graduated high school, he wrote her a letter explaining to her that if it weren't for her in 6th grade, and he had gotten accepted to college, that he never would have done all this. Those I get goosebumps talking about it.
Sure.
Can you share a story like that with us? I'm sure you've got plenty.
As a high school teacher and administrator, my stories like that are not in form of letters. They're in form of random meetings. Yeah, I might be at a gas station and see a former student who's now a corrections officer. Hey, Mr. Williams, man, look, I know I was trouble when I was in your building, but look what I'm doing now. And I'm really trying to turn these young boys around where I'm working. And I say, you know what? That's great. God bless you. I'm happy for you. And I always knew it was in you, but I'm glad you decided to bring it out. If I go to a Walmart and see one of my female students, that's having a positive relationship with her young kids, with her little babies, and rearing them and talking to them rather than yelling at them and embarrassing them in the store. And they say, I learned how to talk to my kids because the way you used to talk to us, Mr. Williams. I said, okay, that's great. I'm glad, because that for me is where it really is. What it is being a positive role model and having a positive effect on future generations, and not the big things, but just the little behaviors that we all engage in with each other every day that makes life a little easier for all of us.
And that's why you do it. right? I mean,
Yeah.
I said at the beginning, sometimes I'll get an opportunity to speak in front of a room of principals or administrators, and I'll start off by saying, "Raise your hands. Who got into education for the money?" And it always gets a good laugh. It's a good way to kind of break the ice. And yeah, but that's why you do it. And sometimes with my wife, she comes home and I hear these stories, and I'm like, why do you do this? But then I'll be in the grocery store with her, and a kid will come running up and give her a hug, and I'll be like, that's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why
I
she
love
does it.
those stories where you meet, recently, a couple months back, I was in a store and I was wearing my fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha gear. And a former student of mine came up to me and gave me the fraternity challenge, which I can't share with you.
Okay.
Um, and we did the handshake. And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I remember those pins you used to wear and those T-shirts and those hoodies you used to wear. And I decided that when I went to college, I wanted to join A Phi A." And I said, "Well, golly, that's really, really a beautiful thing." So it happens in so many different forms. And it's just one of those things that you kind of always remember and smile about when you see kids who used to teach or used to work with, or kids who used to sit in your office when they sat in the classroom sometimes.
That's great. All right. The last one is another selfish question here, a little bit. I say another because I think part of this has been selfish for me. But my daughter is graduating college in May, and one of the
Congratulations.
things she is considering is going into teaching. I think she'll be a great teacher.
Sure.
But what advice would you give people around her age who are going into education or thinking about going into education right now?
Okay. Well, because it's your daughter, I'm going to treat her as if she were my daughter. I'm going to be honest, forthright,
Perfect.
young fine. I would say, number one, make sure it's something you truly want to do, because some people get into this thing because it's a job to have while they're waiting for their dream job to come along. If that's why you do it, your time in the classroom might not be a positive time for you. That's one. Number two, you got to have a thick skin, especially with young people these days. If somebody's saying something bad about you or hurtful to you, makes you crumble up and just, go into the fetal position, this ain't for you. It's just real talk. Know that you have to have a strong sense of self and be ready to defend your need for self care. You don't have to say yes to everything. Okay. Your job primarily is to educate those young people. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that you shouldn't form relationships. You must form relationships with the students. And when I say form relationships, I don't mean be their buddy, be their pal, be their friend. I mean know who they are, what their interests are. And when you have the opportunity to tap what you're teaching into what their interests are and connect those things, that's when beautiful moments happen, because then they'll be motivated to work for you. And if this and students are just like ball players or just like anybody else. If they like their coach, they'll run through a wall for them. If they like their teacher, they'll do the same. So, but in getting that child to like you or appreciate you, it's not about being their buddy, their pal, or their friend. And that ain't it. You're a grown person. You got enough friends. You don't need 15-year-old friends. But it does mean knowing who they are, what they're about, what motivates them, and what drives them.
Awesome. Cannot wait to play that for Haley Fine. No question about it. Thank you. And hopefully it'll help some other people out there too. All right, final question is the multi-parter here. I'm just going to give you a couple of words and I want you to react to them. Number one, tutoring.
You know, important, very important, because the parents that know the need and the importance of tutoring are only going to benefit their kids in the long run. Don't expect your child to get every single thing they need to know from the school building. It's not going to happen. And if you're waiting for that to happen, you're being neglectful as a parent. Number one, you got to work with the kid. And if you have the wherewithal and if you have the finances to be able to do that, please, do the tutoring if you can, the paid tutoring, because it says people say things are expensive, but what I know about parents and people is this: we spend money on the things that are important to us. We find that money.
Yep.
So my suggestion would be to, number one, be involved in the school, but don't shy away from tutoring. If your kid needs extra help, get it for him.
Awesome. Class size.
Class sizes on general, I think, should be smaller. But that having been said, it's all about your ability to manage and organize. If you if you are a managed and organized person, you can control 30 kids just as well as 10. If you're not, you have 5 kids in your class, and your class will be in chaos. It's all about what you bring to the table and what you're able to do and what you're able to compartmentalize and get together in terms of having a lesson plan. And I got to add this. A lot of people jump on the whole idea of lesson plans, and they say, we ask teachers to have these plans and we shouldn't ask them to do that, and that's too much extra work for them to do and all of that. I hear that growing sentiment. I will say this to teachers. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So have something written down somewhere about how the structure of the course, how it's going to go, how we're going to move through each lesson, move through each day, move through each month, move through the year, so that you don't lose control of the focus of the class.
Yeah, and we could go down a rabbit hole, or we could talk for this for a long time, because as the husband of an educator, my wife, and people talk about how much money teachers make and should they make more, shouldn't they, whatever. She comes home, she has something to eat, and what's she do? She goes right to work for the next day. She takes her bag over into the family room, and the TV's on, but she's got her stuff out every day. It
Right,
doesn't stop. So if
right,
you're doing the job right, that's how it's going to work. All right,
right.
the last thing I'm going to ask you, I've been selfish in getting a lot of stuff here. And look, we do tutoring and staffing at United Testing Service. Let's be honest. I loved hearing you say how important tutoring is, and a lot of schools can provide it for their students as well. And we help schools out with that. It's part of what we do. But
Sure.
look, we didn't talk about it before. I just wanted to hear your take. I want, in the last one, to ask you to tell people what your dad did that was so special,
Oh,
that
thank you.
has had such an impact on people throughout the country. And through really wound up being through the sports world, but as you said, you learned so much from him, and I wanted to take part of this podcast to let you talk about that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Mark. My father, late Dr. Eugene Williams Sr., died in 2021. Died 5 years ago, but in the years before he passed away, he told me he was going to make it his personal mission to have the song "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is also a Christian hymn written by James Weldon Johnson, the black man, but it's also known by the NAACP as the Negro National Anthem. He wanted that sung before just about every major professional and college sporting contest in this country. And I said, Dad, why is that so important to you to have that song sung along with the national anthem and all the other songs they sing at the beginning of the games? He said, because if you look at the majority of our pro sports, and this is my dad's take. Now, remember, this is the old elderly black man, grew up was born in the 40s. He
Right.
said, I look at sports, and most of the athletes I see that bring glory to the league and bring glory to this country through the Olympics, the overwhelming majority of them many times are African American. And he said, and I saw what happened with young Mr. Kaepernick. That's what my dad used to call him. And I said, nah, we've got to do something to let these young men know that we as a nation are appreciative of the contribution that you make, sometimes at the expense of your mind, your bodies, and your souls, to entertain America. And so he said, I think it's the least we could do, especially in leagues where the overwhelming majority of athletes are African American, to add that to the beginning of what we do at the beginning of every game. And so he started out making calls all over the country. He started out making personal calls and letters to the NBA. And before you knew it, the Washington Wizards were doing it, the Brooklyn Nets were doing it, the Boston Celtics were doing it, the Atlanta Hawks were doing it, and it spread out. And then a few years back, when you saw Alicia Keys do it at the Super Bowl, there was an article in Newsweek that same year that talked about how the role that people like my father, Dr. Eugene Williams Sr., the role that Al Sharpton, the role that many athletes played in this becoming a reality. And so my dad was one of the major proponents. If you ever want to find out his story, just Google Dr. Eugene Williams Sr., Lift Every Voice and Sing, and it gives you a whole plethora of all the different teams and universities and colleges and organizations that he worked with to make this happen. And so as his son, I'm just so grateful that I had a father that had a mind for that type of thinking, that was an educator, that was a model for all students of all colors. Every time I hear that song, I get emotional, no doubt about it.
And every time I hear it, I think about you and your dad. It's amazing, and it's also a lesson in there's no such thing as can't,
Right.
because as a former journalist, I know how hard it is to get a hold of these people and to get through to them and just to get a conversation, and to think that he had that idea. And I'm sure when he told people, whether it was you or somebody else, it's like, come on, you're gonna get the
Listen, when he told
NFL
us
or
that
the
idea, we thought we said, "Dad, you're getting old. What are you doing?" But he stuck by it, and I looked up, and he kept doing it and kept talking about it. And I look up one day, and he's being interviewed by L. Duncan on ESPN Radio one day talking about this thing. And I look up, and he's being interviewed by NBC, and before I know it, he's in different magazines and all this stuff. And I'm just like, "You did it, Dad. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." And
amazing.
he did it with phone calls and letters. His last years of his life. That's what he spent the majority of his life doing, networking with folks to make this happen.
What a legacy. Amazing accomplishment. And look, you also had so many amazing accomplishments. Appreciate you stepping in. Look, if we needed somebody, Dr. Fein's got tough shoes to fill, man, but you did the job and then some. Again, look for his podcast, Talk to Me with Eugene Williams Jr. And also tell people again your Instagram, because I know everybody's on the socials. They got to check you out there.
Will JR, and you will see, and you will hear all kinds of great information about what I think about education, what I think about life, what I think about the current political situation. Sometimes people get a little, upset with me about that, but I'm too old to care.
You don't have to worry about the lawsuits anymore.
Right. So yes, I just enjoy talking to people, and I want to thank you, Mark, because you're one of those young men that, once again, we always talk about this. We could spend 5 or 6 years apart, and then when we finally see each other again, it's like we never left the front porch of Ransom Everglades making funny faces and acting stupid at the end of the school day.
I know the exact picture you're talking about. Yes. Team, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, buddy.
All right. We'll see you next time on Five Questions with Dr. Fine.